I'll tell you something about Philip Glass. As soon as I figure out more information about Philip Glass, the truth is that I really am not that familiar with his music or his compositions, although I'm sure that I've seen a ton of the movies that he has scored, but I am generally not that familiar with his music. Spitfire Audio recently just hooked up and were involved in creating their latest Labs collection where they sampled his piano at his home in New York City. So I thought I'd take this opportunity to try to create a composition without being familiar with his music to see if his DNA somehow made its way in through those samples on some kind of subconscious level. And I'm going to let you, my audience, be the judge and tell me, does it sound like his music? Does it not sound like his music? And I'd be really interested to know what you think. So let's get to it, my friends. All right, let's do this. So this project got a little, it got a little larger than I probably would have liked to have done. To give you an idea how long I work on these, by the way, if you're wondering, so 2 hours is pretty much what I give myself to come up with something. 2 hours from nothing, from no template, from just scratch, to come up with something. Does that mean it's a completed and finished thought? No, I think it's like a sketch. That's what they've been called, and I think that's a really good description of what these are. But hopefully at the end of those 2 hours, I've come up with something. This one probably was more like probably 3 or 4 hours. It just started to get a little bit longer. But let's get to it. So as usual, I try to pick something from any kind of new sample library. I don't know, I'm having issues there with this lab, something about the way I installed it. But anyway, so this is the catalyst of this composition. So this is the Philip Glass piano anthem sound, it's called. And this is basically what created the whole composition. And then I'm going to tell you how I further processed it. So let's listen to that to start off with. Okay, so I immediately liked this sound from the start, although I did process it a little bit. So EQ rolled off quite a bit of the low end on this, and I also added a tremolo. So let's listen to it without the tremolo, and I'll turn on so you can hear the difference. So as you can see, a pretty significant difference. And it's only because I think I got a little carried away when I was recording this track, and I think I threw some pedal in there, and it started to just eat up the entire frequency spectrum. And it was just way too much, and no fault of the sample itself. So the tremolo just cleaned it up nicely and also added some nice rhythm. So that's why I did that. Next up went to, so it's just these, the first two tracks, the only two tracks that I used this Glass piano library. This initially was going to be like a full-on piano composition, but it kind of took a different direction for whatever reason. But so what do we got here? Yes, I know I need to fix that error. We got Piano North Star. Okay, so let's check this one out. So mostly I went with the pad sounds. So listen to this. There's a lot of texture in there. There's a lot going on. There's a nice big long reverb tail, and I thought it was a neat sound. Actually reminded me a little bit of the way that the stack library has been processed. So very, very cool. And then, you know, I was like, Solstice, Albion Solstice, I haven't used it in a little while, so I thought I'd pull something out of there. So I went to the Generation, I don't know if it's Generation, Generator, I think is what it is, trio, and we have the Overdriven Bow. Okay, so that's what we have going on there. And we'll play that. Ooh, I like sounds that you can do very little with and say a lot. And that's one of those sounds. Very cool sound. It's a sound I haven't used before. And if you're watching this channel, you know I'm always looking to try new sounds and do different things. Then towards the end of this track, actually, I'm going to come back to the stack cloud. There's a couple versions of that. And we had some melodies. So initially this started with like the glass. You can see that right in a glass grand piano. I'm not going to lie to you. I had a really tough time incorporating the actual piano samples into this composition, but I think that's more of a result of just the nature of this composition, that it's just there's a whole lot of tracks, there's a whole lot going on, and just kind of bigger and bigger and bigger. So to put a little tiny, one little piano key over top of that, kind of doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. So it kind of started as a piano track, quickly evolved into something else. So went back and forth. Of course, I went back to the old, the Noir piano. I know, I'm stuck on this library, and it just works for me, and it feels right. It feels natural. So I use the glass library, but to incorporate different sounds and different ideas, and try to get away from the piano a little bit. So we have kind of, I guess, would be kind of emerging as a theme. And what I'll do is I'm going to play these all together to give you an idea of something that I learned probably from watching Tony Anderson. If you're familiar with Tony Anderson, really gifted soundsmith of sounds and the way that he incorporates. And one thing I remember him saying, one of his, I don't know, videos or something, article that I read, he was talking about layers, okay, adding layers for depth. And that's exactly what we have going on here. So we actually have 3 different sounds layered on top of each other, but playing the same thing. So we have a classical guitar. Okay, this is a sample that that's not a classical guitar at all. Where is it? Where's my classical guitar? I actually did quite a bit of processing with this. This is Ilya Efimov. Hopefully I'm saying that right. He's got some fantastic stuff. If you haven't checked out his sample, he's got some really good stuff. I have a Deduk sample from him. Very, very usable. This is a classical guitar. I went with the old Bassa is the preset that I used from that. And then I pretty, not heavily processed it, but I was really trying to get it out above the mix. So in order to do that, what did I do? So as usual, rolled off a whole lot of low. So, this, if there's going to be one thing you're going to do with your compositions to really clean them up, rolling off those lows, I can't recommend enough. So subtractive EQ as opposed to additive EQ. I can't say how far that's going to go. And you literally just turn on and you just drag it over until the sound becomes thin, and then you pull it back a little bit. It's kind of like with reverb. You throw a whole bunch of reverb until it's too much, and then you dial it back. Okay, so that's what we had going on there. Added a tiny little bit of compression. Very, very little compression. Very gentle compression. No makeup gain. And just get a tiny little, just to kind of even it out a little bit. And then we added some external reverb. Okay, Valhalla Room, the Kingdome, Bright Room, which is just crazy. It's like an endless kind of reverb. So quite a bit thrown out of that, which you have to do when you're using solo sample libraries, solo instruments. You got to get the reverb in there, or it's not going to sit well in the mix. And that still wasn't quite, it wasn't quite there. So we threw on a stereo delay with a little bit of feedback. And the trick with stereo delay is you want to make sure you have a slightly different time between your left and right channels, so it can bounce around in the mix. Okay, so that's what we have going on for that. So maybe I'll play the sound without all of those things going on, and then I'll add them back in. So let's see what we got going on here. So we'll take away the EQ. Okay, and then we'll slowly bring them back in one at a time. Okay, so it might sound a little bit harsh on its own, but it kind of has to be in order to cut through that mix with all these other things going on. So I think if you'll hear in the mix that it sits pretty nicely, I think. And then for a little bit of depth, we have, this is a sample that I really like from Omnisphere. Again, I've talked about Omnisphere and how versatile it is. And I've also probably talked about the fact that I've probably only utilized 5% of this library. It's as good as it's ever been. I feel like it's just one of those ageless libraries. Anyway, this is called Cedar. It's literally called Cedar, and I use it all the time. I use it in my live looping setup, and it's just one of those sounds. Again, it does a lot with very little. So let's listen to that. Okay, so the same melodic line, but it's sitting underneath just to add some kind of cool and interesting things. And then we have just a straight up noir felt. I probably should have rolled off the low on this, but I didn't. Okay, that sits just very, very low in the mix. Okay, in terms of, there's a little bit of reverb thrown at it. The color knob is, I fooled around with this quite a bit. So initially I rolled it all the way over to get a nice, soft, delicate sound. But again, there's so much going on, it was just getting buried. So I had to sort of kind of bring that up into a halfway point just so you can get a little bit of the attack of the piano. But again, it sits low in the mix. And then we have just a noir playing just some light, soft chords underneath as a separate part. Just very, very, very delicate kind of supported kind of sound underneath. And then to that we added, what do we have going on here? Oh yeah, okay, so this is Native Instruments is really good at coming up with these very, very intuitive libraries that have kind of preset rhythms in them. And this is one of those libraries. So it's just the strummed acoustic. I think there's even a strummed acoustic too from Native Instruments. So this is the original one. I don't think I upgraded it, but I probably haven't. I just maybe haven't upgraded it. I'm not sure. But so literally just holding one note and you get this underneath. Let's listen to this. Now, on its own, it's probably going to say, well, Dan, that sounds a little robotic. And you're right, because it's basically like a looped performance of an acoustic guitar. But when you sit it under the mix, it just adds some rhythmic texture, and that's all that it's doing. That's all that it's trying to do. Okay, and then we have another Omnisphere track. Boy, we threw a whole lot of this track. It was like one of those things that just kind of gets out of hand. What do we got going on here? Postmodern duophone. It's a sound that I've never used before, so I'm always trying to use something different. So let's listen to this. And this is what Omnisphere is so good. It's like the secret sauce. It has all these things going on, and it's one of those sounds that kind of evolves, and it's a little sauce at the end. Then we got some Albion 1 octave lows. Okay, use some of the little built-in reverb closer to more of the far mix as opposed to the close mix, which I always tend to gravitate towards, I think, just because of the style of music that I create. And then I programmed the dynamics and expression in afterwards using my little Korg Nano control, because I can't afford a fancy one. But anyway, let's listen to this. You know, and again, it's low in the mix, but just to add a little bit towards the end, build up a little momentum. Okay, and then we have another guitar library, which I really like. The Evolution Strawberry Electric Guitar. Again, I use this all the time. Why? Because I'm a piano player and I'm learning guitar as much as I can, but I can't play it like this. I could, but it would take forever. So sometimes you gotta, throw something in there. So this is called the it's called Dreamland preset. Again, it's just a rhythmic kind of a texture thing. So let's check this out. You're just getting a nice movement between the stereo left. It's like it's ear candy is what it is. Okay, and then we have my favorite sample from the Hans Zimmer percussion, which is Tom Beck's Use It in Everything. I have two different tracks with the Tom Becks, and for the mix, I went about halfway up on the close, and then a little bit more up on the room. I believe that is room. S is surround. Room, R for room. And correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, and so two of those rhythmic textures underneath. I love this sound so much. So good, so good. And then I layered that with a second track on top, which was a separate performance. I did loop it, but it's a fairly long loop. And then what I did is I also automated that in to sneak in this second part. Okay, so let's listen to those two tracks together so you can see what's going on. Let's just move it up a little bit here. Right about there. Come on, that's just a ridiculously amazing sound. Okay, and then I've been using this. Okay, back to the stacks. Okay, and this is just literally one of their sub bass sounds. Okay, from the Machine's original kicks, and this is the original sound, and literally just a sub bass hit at the end. That's all it is. That's all it's doing. Okay, and let's listen to that. That's a sweet sound, man. I can only imagine if you guys are listening to this like with a sub. I got like these little earbuds in right now, and it just about blew my ears out. So I probably have to mess with that. Probably went a little bit too far. Okay, and then we have two instances of Stax Cloud guitar, which I love. Okay, so it's in the guitars and it's the cloud. Ton of reverb. Okay, I pushed this puppy all the way up, blew that aperture straight out of the water, and it's just adding a little bit, kind of carrying on the theme. So the theme is kind of introduced on the classical guitar with a little bit of this Omnisphere underneath and the felt piano underneath. And then towards the end, just for a little bit something different, I take that same theme and I just throw this guitar over top of it just to try to create like a build. And that's what I'm doing here. So let's listen to that. Just a killer sound. The second track is just literally the same sound, but I didn't want to layer it on top, so I just kind of threw that part in the end. And I think that is pretty much it. So yeah, and then I already talked about Valhalla. We talked about the stereo delay. Got a limiter on at the end, and that is it. So about 4 hours of work. Is it done? Is it complete? Not necessarily, but there's something there. The catalyst was the glass piano, the first sound that came out, or that I threw in, and that's kind of what created the track. And sometimes that's all I'm looking for. I'm just like a little spark, just something different to get me going. So I'm going to play the track, and then I'd be curious to see what you think. Drop some comments in there and say, hey, this doesn't sound anything like Philip Glass. Philip Glass's music is so much better than this. Oh, hey, this sounds a little bit like Philip Glass. Or, hey, maybe you should learn something about Philip Glass, but just be nice. Be nice in the comments. There's too much negativity in the world, especially in my city right now. So be nice. That's all I ask. So I'm going to play this track. And let me know what you think, my friends. Here we go.